This is the famous headline in a city that we know very well, where they're spending $1 million on a toilet that doesn't get built for basically a year. And so the core issue comes down to understanding how do you actually break down the process so that it works for everybody and delivers results faster and deliver outcomes faster. And if you understand fundamentally what the core pieces of friction exist in government that forces you to have bad outcomes, then you can actually get closer and closer to solving the real problem at task.
Are you applying to Y Combinator? Before you hit submit on your application, you need to hear this. The acceptance rate is under 1%, and most founders get rejected without ever knowing what went wrong. That's why we built YC Roaster, a completely free tool where you submit your application and get brutally honest feedback from a real YC alumni. AI screens it first, then actual founders who've been through the program tell you exactly what to fix. No cost, no catch, it's completely free, just a better application for you. Go to ycroaster.com before the next deadline, link in the description. The US government is spending $2.7 trillion a year buying things from water bottles to fighter jets, and most of it still runs through Microsoft Word and email chains. Meanwhile, VCs have funded 47 AI copilots for salespeople. Something doesn't add up. So today we're talking with the YC founder who's actually fixing this and why the smartest LPs are not paying attention yet. I'm very happy to have August Chen from Hazel on the Lobster Talks. August, welcome to the show.
Gabriel, thank you for having me.
I'm very, very happy to just, have you here and talk about this. So listen, I spend a lot of time looking at YC companies and what they're attacking. And one thing that jumped out at me was in your batch and in the subsequent batches, there's usually around 1-2% GovTech. AI companies are everywhere, but almost nobody is going after the government's buyer directly. And then I look at the numbers, we've said it, 2.7 trillion a year, 19,000 buying entities. And I think either everyone else is wrong or there's something about this market that scares people away. So you've talked about the process being held together by Microsoft Office, legacy point solutions, tribal knowledge, and overworked civil servants. Give me the most absurd example you've seen, the moment when you realized this wasn't just inefficient, it was actually failing the American people.
Gabe, this is everywhere across America. I mean, you live in your own cities and you can't even think about the road in front of you being fixed in the next day just because you really need it to get to work. That is just such a classic example of your government not able to do the right things it needs to do to serve its people. And at the end of the day, there's a huge amount of process, yes, that goes behind the scenes for it to actually happen. But it is fundamentally broken when you have cities across the country that are paying 2x the rate for a retail for a truck, or spending $1 million on a toilet. This is the famous headline in a city that we know very well, where they're spending $1 million on a toilet that doesn't get built for basically a year. And so the core issue comes down to understanding how do you actually break down the process so that it works for everybody and delivers results faster and deliver outcomes faster. And if you understand fundamentally what the core pieces of friction exist in government that forces you to have bad outcomes, then you can actually get closer and closer to solving the real problem at task.
Wow. Okay. So tell me, what does a procurement officer tech stack literally look like? Bring me into a typical Tuesday afternoon. We sit next to this guy or this woman. What does it look like? What's the tech stack?
It's crazy. I mean, today you will find folks all across government still working with pen and paper. For what it is they're doing, government is obviously an incredibly human job because they don't have room to make mistakes. They have to have the utmost amount of transparency and they have to follow every rule in the book to the word. So for them, they have to be reading a lot of PDFs all day. They try to ingest information however they can across all internet sources. They store everything in their local file storages. They're writing documents through Microsoft Word and locally on their own computers. And they're just submitting things to either random websites or one-off procurement platforms that allows them to advertise their bids to people. It's very, in a sense, not as cutting edge as we think about technology today in today's world, but government is actually ready to take that next step. And yeah, here at Hazel, we're also ready for that journey with them and trying to figure out how to actually start integrating tools, how to connect intelligence across the entire spectrum of the tech stack so that they can have decisions ready to go whenever they're making their first initial decisions in the beginning about what it is they want to buy, all the way to then executing the buy itself.
So also, when you came from Palantir before building this, you saw how government tech could actually work at its best. It could be super efficient. And so, was the procurement side a shock for you when you discovered it?
No. So when I was at Palantir, I saw procurement firsthand in working with my customers across both public and private sector. One of the most important use cases was fighting wildfires in California with PG&E. I mean, by the end of the project, we were reducing wildfire instances by 99%. But you have to ask yourself, why is the grid, or why was, why was it so challenging to be able to fix the grid, maintenance it, make sure that poles are not falling over and that the poles are actually literally 100 years old of delivering energy and electricity to everybody across California. So fundamentally, it's not really a budget problem. They're spending tons of money. I know that. It is also not an execution problem. I mean, the job itself is pretty standard. There's no, cutting edge scientific way to install poles. I mean, they're doing some cutting edge work now, but it's just installing and maintaining poles. So that is where it becomes a procurement challenge. Understanding what work needs to be done, and then understanding how you can build a good scope of work, or making sure that the people around you who want to be able to service you can do work efficiently at a cost that is worth their time so that everything can get done. How do you make sure that you're sequencing events and sequencing and strategically purchasing things so that it meets the goals of your agency or your company or whatever? Buying things should actually be fun, and buying things should actually be very efficient. And yet we don't do it very well. So one of the biggest questions Hazel hopes to answer in the next few years, not just for government, but also for everyone else, is, hey, how do we make sure that what you're buying is actually helping contribute to the outcomes? When no one thinks about procurement in that way today, they definitely should think about that next year.
Wow, that's awesome. And I want to talk about something that fascinated me about your YC journey. Basically, you launched in the Winter 24 batch as a marketplace. You help businesses find and respond to government RFPs, two-sided marketplace, typical. But then you relaunched as a completely different business, software sold directly to government agencies. And you wrote in your relaunch something that stuck with me. We realized that if our mission was to help governments, we will best accomplish that by going directly B2G, business to government, not B2B2G. So that's a very sort of clean sentence for what must have been a very messy decision. What was the actual moment of realization behind that pivot?
Take me back to Winter 24, man. That was a very fun time for Hazel because we were very much so, how do we remain the missionaries, not the mercenaries of our field? And the number one thing that we saw, 50% of small businesses no longer want to participate in the market. Like the cost of goods and services, 2x, 3x in the last few years for government, right? Like this fundamental idea that we can bring back competition into the market if there were just better tools in the ecosystem to go, help folks just compete more, right? And the original thesis was just, okay, well, if our main KPI was that we saw that there's 50% fewer businesses in the last 10 years competing in governments, well, let's just get that number up. And if to get the number up, we just thought very greedily, okay, let's just build software for businesses because I'm sure they want to get involved with it. And I would literally be FedExing real papers on behalf of businesses to go support government procurement. And that part wasn't bad. We weren't deterred by the fact that it was hard work. It was that we weren't really seeing how our customers felt more incentivized to participate in government, right? Like a lot of B2B2G folks in today who are selling to make government sales better are selling to folks who want to participate in the market, right? I think we were already focused back then on helping folks who should be participating but didn't really want to. And I think because of that, we realized, okay, if the true goal is to make sure that we're the missionaries and we want to re-incentivize folks to come back into the government procurement market, then it actually probably is easier to just build with government directly, who should also be incentivized to bring businesses back into the market, right? Like you talked, like I've been talking to hundreds of mayors over the last few years. This has really resonated with them. If we want to be able to revitalize their local businesses to get to working with their government again, making sure that the opportunities are not just lying with the few incumbents that they probably don't maybe like don't like as much, or like are just tired of working with, then they should have the software to do that work better. And once we're in the room, we realized, oh wow, this really was the case. I mean, I love it when theory becomes practice. And we realized that really was the case. And so just simply, for instance, for vendor stuff directly, de-siloing their vendor data and giving them the intelligence to be able to pick and choose, and making sure to show interest in folks that they want to work with. That really was like the great unlock. And the more momentum we built there, the more we realized that B2G really was the right way to go about this. But really, mission wise, yes, we did pivot product wise, but mission wise, really nothing has changed since the beginning.
That's pretty awesome. When you pivot product wise, but the mission stays the same. I love that answer. It's probably what a lot of YC companies actually do when they pivot. Keep the same sort of very basic original idea, but bring it in another way. That's really cool. Before I forget, if you're enjoying this episode so far, please consider subscribing. I always forget to say it, so sometimes I remember. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. You can also watch us on YouTube. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding in the VC world about selling to government. I'm sure you've seen that before, especially in 2024. That we're pre-Trump, pre-Doge, pre-Musk, pre-everything. Most investors at the time heard government and they think, oh my God, 2-year sales cycle, procurement nightmare, forget it. And then you look at, of course, Palantir, obviously, that's worth 250 billions. Or you look at Hazel and you realize it's not the whole story. And so you've sold to a major city, the city of Dallas, and their announcement talks about you cutting the RFP process from months to days. And so that's the kind of claim, that makes investor pay attention. How did you get in the room in the first place? There's no PLG motion for government procurement software. So what does the sale process actually look like when your buyer is a director of procurement services?
Yeah, and wow, Dallas being only just a few months ago too feels so surreal. And since then, we've also gained a few more really cool customers across the board that really showcase to us the value of what it is we're building. Reducing processes of procurement that people think take forever down to days, from like months to days. Thinking about how we're building documents in seconds, like doing vendor research and all those pieces really quickly. And that impact obviously should make investors feel, yes, like not gonna lie, the work to be done in government, there's so much to be done that it's a miracle that there haven't been more folks figuring out how to support government do its work.
Yeah.
And I do think the challenge that people, like culturally don't understand as a founder, perhaps, like, so I'll talk about the founder side and then I'll talk more about the VC side in a second, is selling to government is very counterintuitive to what we should be doing as founders, right? As founders, we should be impatient. We should be incredibly annoying. Like, we need to figure out how to like build the most disruptive thing in order to get really great outcomes. But government can't operate like that. Like, government can't fail. It's one of the funniest things I think about procurement is people can ask me, hey, wait, what's the problem here? Government is definitely still buying a lot of stuff. Right? And because they're still buying a lot of stuff, is there something actually truly broken in the process? The answer is still yes. The problem is people are losing elections. Some cities have to have layoffs now because their budget is in crisis.
Wow.
There are serious downstream effects of bad procurement, as most importantly, creating distrust between its people and its elected leaders. And so for us, when we didn't have that down in the beginning, that really hurt Hazel in terms of how we understood sales and go to market, because that is the thing that you actually do have to understand. I mean, if it's B2B, great. Like, you still have to understand that. But in B2G specifically, this is the most important piece. Really understand the hierarchy of needs as to like what it is your customer is trying to get at. And for us here at Hazel, we had to figure out that the hard way. But once we did, it made it easier to sell. It made it way easier to actually engage with our customers, and we built product way faster, right? Because when you fundamentally sympathize with the fact that government cannot fail, government is already doing its job, and that the government, if it changes too much and fails even further, people don't want to get blamed.
Yeah.
Then those three combination of things gives you the boundaries of which you have to operate in order to then deliver a successful product. That means for Hazel, we can't jump out of the bounds too much, but we have to be able to observe just enough process to help them see where we can accelerate them the most. And then, as true missionaries, little by little, show them what the true pathway to success might look like step by step, right? De-risking it step by step. And so what the other folks like Palantir and Andrew have done so well is that when they came in, they weren't just telling everybody, hey, let's just break everything apart. They were solving for real hair on fire problems that they need to solve tomorrow. And then when that gets solved, then showing them what the rest of the innovation could look like. At Palantir, this is very normal. Like, get your first pilot in, forward deploy yourself. I know it's such an overused term today, but really important that you forward deploy yourself in building a good product that is repeatable so that your VCs don't think that you're just a consulting shop. And then once you kind of really narrow down into, hey, this is what we're going to do, growing and building that trust with the customer step by step. And so I think there's a huge cultural balance that has to happen for founders when they want to go into the GovTech space. And Hazel just had to figure that out. And any other successful GovTech founder, like Phaedra at Promise, probably the most famous GovTech founder at YC, had to figure that out. And it's just super, super important because then that actually defines what your sales playbook looks like. And once you have a sales playbook, then no matter what company you're building, you're going to be successful.
Hopefully. I mean, I, as an investor, focus a lot on sales playbook. So it's exactly the next question I wanted to ask you. Your team is around 5 people, 5 to 7 reported at least. And so, how do you sell to the city of Dallas, to the Navy, and a school district at the same time? Is there a common sales playbook here?
I know it sounds crazy that we could be selling to school districts, large cities like New York City, and also the federal government and the military, all in the
Yeah,
same
crazy.
case. I think what definitely helps is that my co-founder and I, we come from very specific backgrounds. So I myself, public sector, private sector from Palantir. My co-founder specifically did defense acquisitions and procurement at BCG. And so we saw a lot of the two different worlds there and going into this space. They definitely have their both unique challenges, but when it comes to specifically talking about procurements, it is crazy how fundamentally similar everyone is across the board. Right? I'm not going to say this is all the same across GovTech. If you're building a GovTech company, you're going to have to find your very specific niche at first to figure out, like, hey, like what here is actually repeatable. Thankfully for procurement, it is very much so all the same. It is a context and decision problem. LLMs are amazing at those. You have mountains and mountains of paperwork and legal compliance that has to be understood first, which then translates into a very specific and robust procurement process that government has to follow that they don't actually understand very well. And that is really Hazel's alpha, because we can use AI to help them understand their process better, which then helps them get to finishing tasks in that process that gets them to the finish line a lot faster as well. So that's kind of our bread and butter. I would say for the different types of governments specifically in our sales playbook, the same thing kind of rings true across B2G and also B2B. And I actually read a lot of B2B sales playbooks because I was like very stuck for a very long time after YC and figuring out, why are we not selling? What is wrong with me? Am I just not charming enough? Am I not figuring it out? No, I was just talking to the wrong person.
For sure, not charming enough. Tell us in the comments. All right. I'm trying to engage the community to boost your ego here. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, there's always the decision maker. There's always the guy who holds the purse strings, and then there's your user. And so we would always only ever focus on one person for some reason at a time. We were so heavily invested in users in the beginning because well, I'm from Palantir, and like all I did was like talk to users, and I realized,
Yeah.
yeah, of course I can talk to them. I'm going to build something that they want. Right? We're going to build something that they want, and then I realized, wow, the users and governments have no decision authority, unfortunately, right? Like as much as they want to be heard, as much as they want to like, feel that they have power around what it is that they can accomplish, they don't actually really have that. And then you go, but then you go to all the way to the decision maker, and then all of the things that I've been trying to sell to the users is not what sells to your decision makers. And so figuring out that balance over time, understanding what makes different folks tick, then getting to the meat of it, saying, okay, why is my software fundamentally changing how government is run? And like, why should
Mm,
the person across from me really care about that? It is such a universal skill
mm.
that I just didn't learn for myself for way too long. But it's also one of those things that like once you get it, you just get it. So we figured it out, and now we're finding a lot of success in that space. No matter if we're talking to SecWar all the way in the federal government, or if we're just talking to the superintendent of a school district, it's very, very important that we're aligned on the missions of who our decision makers are, but also at the same time that we're building the best possible product for real users on the ground who do a tireless job of making sure that our government runs on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's exactly my next point on the product. Great transition, because there's this tension probably that I guess every GovTech AI company faces. LLMs are probabilistic and government procurement is deterministic. So if you miss one single compliance checkbox, basically you void the whole thing. And so I think I saw your Harvard thesis was on safely deploying aerosols into the stratosphere, if I'm correct. So that's geoengineering. So apparently you're comfortable with sort of high stakes, high level technical systems. But of course, when you're building AI that is drafting a solicitation for the US Navy, you better not mess it up. So is there a human in the loop architecture, or how do you mitigate that?
You think I learned my lesson by now about working in heavily heavily regulated spaces. Oh man, yeah, my senior thesis project was crazy because my whole point was, look, NASA is now going to allow my lab to send a machine into Earth, into
Yeah,
low Earth
yeah,
orbit, to spread aerosols that could potentially harm the environment instead,
yeah.
which makes a lot of sense. And so I was trying to build models around it to like let folks know, hey, this is actually pretty safe. We should just try it and see what
It's
happens.
awesome.
Now, obviously, lots of folks are doing geoengineering across the planet, um, but back then,
That's really
obviously,
cool.
like it was very, very scary. And so, I mean, anything in a regulation environment I learned early on in my life is about how do you make sure that you have all the right pieces in place to, like, it's not about the regulation, right? It's about making sure that you feel that you're making the safest possible decision. And building trust and safety in a complex, many stakeholder environment is what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So when the government talks about regulation and compliance procurement, look, they're making someone that we're going to work with very soon. It is one person making 1,000 purchasing decisions a year by themselves.
Wow. Crazy.
Crazy. It is physically impossible for that one person to get it right all 1,000 times. And
Yeah, for sure.
which is why you see patterns where if a person's overworked and they don't have the bandwidth to be able to regularly review the compliance of their purchasing decisions, which they're making on average 2 to 3 a day for, then they tend to just repeat vendors. They tend to just like go with the flow as to like what they know worked in the past, and that's why we
Yeah.
get fewer vendors. That's why we get like government procurement is not like it's not broken in the way that people think like, oh, it's corrupt or anything like that. They're forced to make decisions because they literally just don't have the time to do otherwise.
Yeah. You take shortcuts. If you have to do, you said 1,000 a year, there's only 200 working days or something. So you make five per day. Like that's too many. You go with what you know. You take shortcuts.
I think government's working more than 200 days, but yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
that's true.
they're actually working a lot. Like these are really hardworking folks, and so I really feel for them, And so for them, compliance again is about trust and just making sure that their decisions are defensible. right? If they could make better strategic decisions, would they? They just don't. They just want to make sure that they're not introducing too much risk again into the system. So when it comes to our deployment of products, trust is so much at the center of the ethos of what it is we're trying to deploy. So when we have, you know, capabilities in terms of we want to build documents faster, we want to find vendors, we want to like maybe do evaluations on proposals. We start off with what do you do today? And so they're writing Word docs from scratch. They're injecting templates, or they have vendor data where they search on very specific commodity codes for what vendors do. We start there. You go from there as to like what it is they're currently comfortable doing, and then seeing how we're already making their day-to-day job from doing the things that they do on a daily basis 10 times faster. And then you start injecting, AI where it should belong, right? So for vendor data search, yeah, continue searching on those codes and commodity codes, but we're going to add on an additional layer just in case you missed any vendors in your search process, so that we use AI enrichment to help you find more relevant vendors, right? So it's the same process. We're just helping you do a little more. Or when it comes to writing documents, you're actually doing a mental step of generating requirements bullet by bullet before you even write the document. So let's
Yeah.
actually help you do that with AI first, because that takes you 5 seconds, and then you can refine it from there, and then build the full document in totality. Or when you're doing evaluations, look, we're not going to we're not going to evaluate which vendor you should pick. But what you're doing is that you're reading hundreds of pages and you forget to take notes. Let me build an AI tool that helps you remember which notes you really care about for this vendor. So it's that's really at the crux of like how do you build human product for government. And so in that sense, AI is doing a human job just faster. And I think the focus on a lot of these very regulated areas, like legal, insurance, banking, whatever, is thinking about, sure, like, yeah, AI can make mistakes, humans make mistakes. So let's just make sure that if you're going to catch mistakes, catch them faster and then get your job done faster and then strategize afterwards, right?
It
Um,
reminds me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
I was going to say it reminds me a lot of full self driving from Tesla. Everyone's was scared of like, hey, what if the AI does a mistake and drives you into a tree? And the data now shows that yes, AI does maybe sometimes some mistakes, but it's at least 5 times safer than humans. We do mistakes as well, and actually many more. So if we because we live in a world of mistakes, you might as well have the AI that's going to do much less mistakes as you. And humans do mistakes as well, even in government, even in procurement, even in everything. So this is, in the end, most likely a much better system.
Great metaphor. And I couldn't agree more.
And so I wanted to ask you, but I guess the answer is probably it has never happened. But I'm curious, has there been a moment where you actually caught an error done by an AI where, if you hadn't caught it, or catch it, if you hadn't catch it, probably is the way to say it, it would have been like a big problem for whatever that company or that, that procurement process?
Our platform itself has never made a mistake in the way that you're describing it, but we can only do as well as what government procurement thinks, or what
Mm.
government procurement officials think their procurement should look like. And so when we were ideating with folks in the room, at City Hall, thinking about, well, this is going to happen, and you don't want your staff to over rely on our tools to do 0 to 1 work, then what do we do about that? Right. And we realized, oh, there is a new product here to be built. And so we built this tool called Scope Review, which is quite literally just an AI reviewer of everything that could literally go wrong with what it is that you're trying to buy. And that was so fundamentally game changing for our users, because we realized they are never spending enough time actually reviewing what goes wrong in procurement. And that has actually made all the difference, because imagine just being able to just catch every single thing that you are already worried about. And instead
Yeah.
of worrying about what you could be worried about, just worry about what we think are like real problems. And the crazy part is that you think, oh, well, how do you make this specific to government procurement? There's so much data out there, so much as to how government procurements go wrong, that we were able to develop on top of that and exactly showcase to them like where the average median use case of where things go wrong, because government procurement commonly can go wrong, uh, is surfacing in their procurements today, and that has made all the difference.
Very cool. I want to sort of zoom out for 1 second and maybe talk more about you as a founder. Like we said before, you were at Palantir before building this, which is really sort of the most successful GovTech for now, at least. Maybe Hazel will be the next one, but so they've done clearly a lot of things right. And you build this in 2024, we have to remember. And of course, then Doge comes along and they say, oh, we're going to use AI to make government efficient. So, you're here trying to actually getting government agencies to adopt AI. You're at sort of a unique vantage point on what's real, what works, and how you can actually sell to them. So you also posted on LinkedIn on that topic that there's a toxic culture around racing to unicorn status, and how a high valuation can kill your startup. You seem to be a patient founder building in a space where the sales cycle forces patience. So, is that a feature or a bug? What did Palantir teach you about patience, about sales cycle in GovTech, and about hype versus reality in that world?
Yeah, you're talking to somebody who joined Palantir when the stock price was at 25, and then it remained at maybe
Wow.
$7 or $8 for my entire tenure there, and then didn't blow up to the price it is today until I joined YC.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
but
Yeah.
I mean, I owe Palantir a lot for how I understand the space, how I understand being a builder, and also how I, as you mentioned, how I understand myself as a patient, founder building in the space. Because for one thing, it's like such a tricky time always to be a founder when you are equal parts like waiting around for the big results to come through, but equal parts anxious as to why you're not making enough money yet. And so, would I love that I'm making $1 billion tomorrow? Yeah, but am I going to achieve that tomorrow? No. And so, the most important thing to then focus yourself on is, okay, am I just actually solving a real hair on fire problem? And there's so much of that in government that if you pick the right ones, right, like especially in defense, we're talking about an existential crisis where a military potentially can't support itself in terms of fighting the battles that we need to fight. And that's why we're seeing a lot of
Yeah.
success right now in defense tech. In gov tech specifically, our cities right now laying off people even though they had billions of dollars to spend from the infrastructure bill a few years ago, that's crazy. And so when Doge came around and talked about, hey, look, this is a real hair on fire problem where we are trillions of dollars in debt, and why do we have contracts that don't support our missions? That is, I'm not trying to say like we were Doge before Doge, but the idea that procurement itself is such a root cause of how governments are supposed to function and why it's not doing its job is exactly why we got into this in the first place. And I broke it down because of my time from Palantir in terms of understanding, look, there's data to support how you need to do the work. There's workflows that get done every single day. And that workflow is really slow for some reason. And that there's no reason that software should fix that. That's like my mantra every time I launch a new pilot at Palantir. It was like every 2 months, just do that process again and again and again, and it'll scale into an enterprise solution. No different at Hazel. I mean, our solution space is very different. Like we don't do like ontology stuff or like AI workflows or anything special low code stuff like what Palantir does. But it's very focused on this idea that look, there's a problem. There's some data to support how they do this work on a day-to-day basis. And let's bring that into the light and just say, like, look, you're doing this process really slowly, and you could be saving so much money and you could be saving so much time if you're able to put in the right tools to make it work. And so, yeah, I mean, we've been building these tools really quickly. We're like the only people that governments have ever worked with where they get feature requests done within a week. It is just
Wow.
truly transformational for these folks to see what is really the art of the possible. And so uh, like there's so much space here to be explored because I think government has existed for so long, and it's been 3 decades since the internet era boomed. But I'm gonna say, like, they're finally ready to start really adapting and adjusting to these solutions, and that's why in today's market you see a lot more success with folks building in this space. Because and I think once you kind of break down what really works here, which is, look, you're going to see processes that are really slow, you're going to see solutions that are expensive in the space but are still very human driven, that don't work enough for government, that can be replaced, uh, and uh, that are also starting to fail at its core. That is a ripe opportunity for folks like Hazel to come in through the door. I have like plenty of friends in the GovTech space who are doing almost this exact thing for other types of government work, and that's how I rationalize it.
That's very cool. I mean, it makes so much sense. It's very exciting that you feel the government is finally ready. And speaking of which, there's been a lot of tr- trials and a lot of new things being built to the government. I want to talk about. I'm sure you've heard of the chatbot deployed by Doge, and one government employee called it about as good as an intern. And so you're selling AI to the same people, and how do you deal with the trust deficit that Doge or other previous solutions that were not YC companies that were maybe pre LLMs, the trust deficit that they created, and you have to come in and say, no, actually we're different, and how do you deal with that?
Uh, Age old problem, I'm sure. It is hard,
Oh yeah, I can feel
especially,
the pain.
yeah, because I mean, this is definitely not GovTech specific, right? Any industry you go into, banking, insurance, if someone comes in claiming that they have the magic solution to fix all your problems, well, you go, well, I've heard of that one before.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, and for government, that's like no different. People have been pitched the same thing all across time. I've actually met a few exited founders who are building something completely different. And they said, oh, my first company in 2005 was building for AI powered procurement too.
Ouch.
And I said, what, what were you doing back then? So,
Yeah, crazy.
uh, so it's very obvious, at least in a lot of spaces, that you'll always meet the people who know how to talk about the future, but don't know how to build the future. So those are the folks that probably came from the industry, like people from government, people from banking or whatever, who like know the problem so well that they know exactly what the future looks like, but they can't actually build it. And then you have the people that can build things, but don't actually understand what the problems
Oh
are.
wow. Oh.
And so at Hazel, we try to be the perfect intersection of those two worlds as much as possible, and I think we're doing a pretty good job so far. But when we had no traction, when we had no customers, when we had no revenue, it was the most difficult thing to get someone's attention. And we just got very, very lucky that a couple people were forward looking enough to take a couple conversations, and that my really crude retool demo made enough of an impact to convince them to invest money into us so that we could actually build a
Wow.
real software solution. Um, and so it was, we got very lucky early on. Nowadays, it's a lot easier. Nowadays, yes, the pitch is still, look, we are AI powered procurement that helps you save a ton of time and money, but here's all the customers already using us.
Yeah, of
When you
course.
say Dallas, Atlanta, New York City, it's much different conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure. Wow, it's crazy. I mean, customer proof still is so strong today. Before we run out of time, we still have a few minutes, but I really want to get to ask you about your company name. I believe it's named after Hazel Yingli, one of the first Chinese American women to serve as a pilot. And so, can you maybe tell me what the name represents for you and for your co-founder?
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, it, like, wasn't really named after, just inspired, and we just, I think, really like the tone and the voice. I think of like what, like when you say Hazel out loud, what does it really evoke? Also, most importantly, every other name in GovTech today is some weird combination of the word Gov plus something else. So we just want to
Yeah.
be different. But yeah, no, to your point, I think when my co-founder and I were first getting started off, he said, I have one condition. is that if I'm going to join if I'm going to join you as a co-founder for Hazel, or back then no name, but I was like, if I'm going to join you, I want the name to be this, because
Oh
I
wow.
remember this one story of, you know, there was a time when everybody needed to contribute to the contribute to the U.S. Right? We were fighting the most the most challenging war ever. We were fighting the most challenging problems across the globe, and it was during a time period when obviously society wasn't super accepting of everybody, but everyone still came around because the mission was
Yeah.
there, right? The idea that you need to be able to put yourself forward in the best position to make your country a better place to live. And that's what someone like Hazel Ying Lee did, where she was a woman and she was Asian American, but she still became a pilot during the war and had to figure out how she could best contribute. And she is just a really shining example of that in this country. If you want to contribute to our government, if you want to contribute to our society, that you should be given the chance to step forward and do
Yeah.
so. And I think about that a lot when I think about which businesses deserve government's, money to do good work, which businesses in our local communities deserve to be supporting us because we give so much to them, and they want to do even more for us, and that governments really should be subsidizing this. I really think that's hopefully what we will accomplish very, very soon at scale. And in any way that is like what keeps me going and gets me up every single day. That's where we are.
All right, that's awesome. I mean, that resonates a lot with me. I'm an immigrant as well in this country, and I want to contribute to this country as much as I can. Great story. All right, before we wrap, I want to go to my predictions. We have a prediction segment at the end of the show. So give me, real predictions. Like, don't give me, AI will be more into AI. AI will be more in government procurement. Like, we know that. Give me real predictions. So by the end of 2026, how many major U.S. cities will be using AI for procurement? Give me a number.
Oh man. Well, technically, every city claims that they're using AI now because if you don't,
Okay.
you seem very far behind. Uh, I think no. I legitimately think every single city across the U.S. will be using AI in some shape or form by the end of 2026. It's
Wow.
inevitable. Everyone basically knows ChatGPT. Everyone basically knows Claude. Everyone knows like what Google's doing. And I mean, for what it's worth, people have been using AI already on a day to day basis. I think what you do mean is everyone will be using LLMs to some extent to power their jobs. And I think that'll be very, very true. Um,
It's awesome.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. I was moving on to the next question. Please finish.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if you want these to be rapid fire. I'm happy to do so.
Because of the time that we have left, yes, I want to leave
Okay.
you for your next meeting. Yes, so let's move on. I have two more. Will we see a GovTech AI company from a recent YC batch, call it 23, 4, 5, 6, raise a 50 million plus round in the next 12 months? So will any YC GovTech AI company raise a 50 million plus round in 2026?
Yeah, maybe. There was another friend in our batch who's also here in New York City with me, who's building a great company. It's Martin Hunt's garage, and they're doing awesome. So if anybody can do it, they can do it.
Oh wow, awesome! I thought you were gonna shamelessly plug yourself and be like, yeah, we're open for a 50 million round.
I
Okay.
want to make
Uh,
$50 million. I'm not sure if I'll raise that much
well,
money.
I know because you're anti, the unicorn and high valuation, so you're very conservative. You're right. In 5 years, does the average city procurement office have more or fewer staff than today?
They're definitely gonna have fewer staff. There's the data is there. Procurement itself is a dying job market because young people just simply don't want to push paper anymore, and I think that's very disappointing because buying things when you have literally an unlimited budget should be a
Yeah,
fun job, but it is
yeah,
not. And so people understand why it's not a fun job and they don't want to get into the space. Totally get it. I do think, though, that it is one of those functions where I think you will find fewer procurement officers, but more strategic folks in
yeah.
government figuring out how to utilize procurement to do a better job.
Well, it's like those paper pusher jobs. It's like the Gary used to say the the butter passing robot, a robot just to pass you the butter. And that's not a great job to be done by a human. It's better to be automated, whether by a physical robot or, in your case, by an AI. So maybe it makes sense. It leaves people free to do higher jobs on the scale, if that makes sense.
Well, procurement is more than just pushing paper, but yeah, I agree in the sense of like it is very paper heavy today. I think the hard part really is just the compliance process, and the procurement process itself is really hard to navigate. And so they spend more time arguing about how to do procurement than doing it itself. So when we free that up, I'll let you know what those updates look like. But that's the goal, is
Yeah.
to free up people's time to think about what is the better way to purchase things.
Yeah. August, before we leave, if there's an investor, an LP, a VC fund listening to this and thinking about whether or not government-focused AI belongs in their portfolio, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
Government spends $2.7 trillion. There's got to be something.
That was my intro. I agree. You're right. Okay,
Exactly.
that's awesome. Yeah. We'll leave it there. Also, because we're out of time, so I want to let you go to your next meeting. August, thank you so much for being with me and having this conversation. I had a blast. I hope you did as well. To our listeners, thank you for staying until the end. Please consider giving us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. On YouTube, you can subscribe to check the new episode drops every Tuesday. Hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone. Bye.